family that once seemed unbreakable was left in ruins when hidden truths came to light. Abby Stepak, who is 18 years old, called her brother. Her voice was shaky and tense. Plus, she said, "I don't know where I am," as she stood outside his house. "I'm gone," were her last words. No one saw her again after that. After 2 days, her car was found in a park. There was a key in the ignition, and her phone, wallet, and other personal things were inside the car. But Abby herself was not to be found. The cops didn't think the case was very important. Abby Stepak was born on March 31, 1997 in Little Rock, Arkansas. Her parents are Lori and Peter Stepak. Abby lived with her mother after her parents split up, but she still talked to her dad. Her family had a sister named Harris Elizabeth, a brother named Trevor, and a half-brother named Ethan. Each of them has helped raise her. Mike Jernigan, who became her stepfather when he married Lori, was a very important person in her life. Her maternal relatives, especially her grandmother Peggy Holman, were also very important to Abby. She felt safe and supported by her grandmother. Abby's first school was a private one called Lisa Academy. There, she worked hard, was interested, and participated in class. She switched schools at the last minute, though, going to public Little Rock Central High in her senior year. What happened in 2015, including that move, changed her life. Abby always wanted to be on her own and was very interested in learning about the world. Even when she was very young, she was especially interested in learning other languages. She taught herself Spanish, Turkish, and Hebrew by immersing herself in the subtleties of each culture and learning the right way to say words, stress, and volume. Abby was very sure about a lot of things. She was brave enough to protect them. She had a strong case for what she believed in, and she really cared about justice. Abby liked clothes and tried different hair and makeup styles. Her sense of style went beyond just clothes. Her looks changed a lot. Each of the looks she tried was planned. Abby also liked nature, photography, small things, and city streets. She could see the world from different points of view and find beauty in everyday things because she loved taking pictures. Her favorite place to be outside was the ocean. Abby felt calm in nature and she loved telling her friends about it. She had a strong. Her personality was fair and kind, and she couldn't stand people who lied. In 2015, she made a very important choice. She chose to live alone. She quit living with her brother Trevor and began staying with friends and her grandmother. While her parents were worried, Abby saw it as a big step towards being on her own. She got her first real job that summer at a Foot Locker in McCain Mall. On the first try, her parents were proud of how driven and determined she was. Soon, though, they saw changes. She wasn't there as often. It got harder to get to her. As new people entered her life, the mood changed. The world around her and she were both changing. Something was different about Abby. Even though she was still bright and full of energy, she fought back more and was more independent. With her growing self-confidence came a stronger unwillingness to follow the rules. She was okay with change. Actually, she looked like she was chasing it. People who knew her could tell that something had changed about her, though. Abby began dating someone around this time. He didn't make her family feel good. They felt bad about it. They didn't like something about the guy. They never fought with Abby about it in public, but they were worried. However, they were secretly worried that the relationship would get her into trouble. She changed how she behaved as her friends did. Abby began to pull away. Over time, her parents lost touch with her, and her world moved into a private area they couldn't get to. When she moved to a public school, she stopped going to class. Her parents were told by the school, but attempts to talk it out were turned down. Abby did not give up. She wished to be free and able to decide for herself what to do. Every time people talked about rules and who was responsible, the conversation ended without a solution. Her parents had lost track of who she was hanging out with. Even though they were scared, they were losing control. Even Danielle, a close friend, saw that something wasn't right. Since Lisa Academy, they have been close. Although Abby switched schools, they stayed close. But that summer, Danielle saw that the gap was getting bigger. Everything was shared, including fears, dreams, and secrets. Now Abby was guarded and pulled away. It was not her choice to hang out. The spark in their conversations went away. The emotional link that used to make them friends had grown weak. That wasn't all Abby was doing. She was going inside herself. Danielle was worried about more than just Abby's behavior. Now she was running with a new group of people. These people were brave, careless, and rude like the friends Abby used to have. They didn't respect those in charge, they did not follow the rules, and they liked pushing the limits. They caught Abby's eye, though she seemed to be looking for something that she couldn't find anywhere else. Danielle didn't make sense of why Abby stayed so close to that group, but she felt bad about it. These changes lasted for a long time. They were there forever. By the beginning of autumn, things were getting worse. Abby hardly ever went to school. People started not knowing where she was at night. She took off days at a time sometimes. Even though her parents were very worried, any attempts to set limits led to fights. It was clear to Abby that she would not put up with control or pressure. It became clear to Abby's family that she no longer saw herself as a part of their structure. Now that she was living on her own, those rules didn't include them. According to Danielle, their friendship ended that summer. She tried to reach out, but Abby wasn't the same person she knew. Every talk felt less warm and closer, even if Abby didn't say it. Danielle knew Abby was running away from danger, and she knew there was no turning back. In October 2015, Abby Stepak went to a party. Danielle, who had just spent time with her, didn't want to go. She didn't feel safe in that crowd. She wasn't into it. It was terrible news in the morning. Abby went to her parents' house looking upset but calm. She told them that she had been attacked by a group on purpose the night before. Abby said 4 young men were involved and she named them. She was sure they had recorded everything on a cell phone. She didn't say much more. She said that she was shocked, but aware. She did not say much about the party or the events that led up to the attack. It was clear what she was focusing on. There was video proof that the attack happened on her mother, Lori Jernigan, and her stepfather, Michael Jernigan. It was a very sad moment. Michael thought Abby looked determined. That's not what she wanted. She was making clear what she meant. She promised to tell someone. She had a clear mind. She was all set to do something. In the evening, they agreed that Michael would take her to the train station. They didn't agree on a specific time, but everyone knew what they meant. After a while, Abby left the house. She never returned. From then on, she only talked to her family through her grandmother. The event she had reported that morning was never brought up again. When Abby told her family what had happened, that was the only time she was honest about it. Although the trip to the police station never happened, not a single official report was made. After she talked to her stepfather about it, Abby stopped coming home. Her schooling ended. She became less connected to the world around her. It turned out that Abby called her friend Danielle on October 24th, the same day she talked to her family. That day, she told her she was going to see her brother and suggested they get together. It didn't look like her actions were hurting herself. She still tried to get in touch and make plans. Not to pull away, but to a strong need for justice after a traumatic event. On that morning, confession wasn't the only thing that happened. A turning point happened. Some people may have needed a reason to shut her up. After telling her family what was going on, Abby kept texting Danielle. That's how she usually stayed when things weren't going well. Danielle concurred. That night was a way for Abby to get back to a place she knew was safe and familiar. It was a time of comfort with someone she still trusted. Later, Danielle said that Abby looked tense. She was shy and quiet. She paused while she talked. At one point, Abby talked about all the trouble, but she didn't go into specifics. Even though Danielle didn't push, she could tell that Abby was being quiet. Something was making her guard up, but she wasn't ready to talk about it. In the end, Abby needed help with a piercing. She needed to open up one of her old piercings that had closed up. Brienne helped. What happened was normal and not complicated. The tattoo on Abby's shoulder had already healed and said, "Each night leads to a brighter day." She didn't get it on the spur of the moment. What that line said about Abby was true, but there was hope that things could change even though it was dark. October 25th, the next morning, Abby left Danielle's house. She went to the house of her grandmother, Peggy Holman. The visit wasn't planned, but Peggy wasn't shocked. Abby would often drop by without warning. Nothing happened that day. Their activities included talking, eating ice cream, and watching SpongeBob. Abby's mood seem strange in any way. It was dinner time when she arrived. She said she had to meet her stepfather around 8 p.m. Her grandmother was reminded that she was still going to call the police. The plan nevertheless remained in place. She loved her grandparents and gave them a hug before she left. She answered that she would be back soon. Her voice and actions didn't show that she knew something wasn't right. She seemed calm, sure of herself, and at ease. Family members did not see Ebi Stepich again after that. The last part of Ebi's story that could be proven was when she left her grandmother's house on October 25th evening. We don't know what happened after that. Here, the direct line of communication ends the moment Ebi was no longer seen. It looked like she had no plans to leave. It wasn't clear from what she said or did that she was running away. They were told she would be back soon, but she never did. That broken promise was the first real sign that something was wrong. It all changed on the night of October 25th and 26th. Ebi's brother Trevor woke up around 2 a.m. when she called him. As soon as he saw her name flash on the screen, he picked up the phone. Her voice was shaky. She said she was in front of his house. Even though Trevor ran outside, there was no one else on the street. Unfortunately, Ebi and her car were not to be found. For some reason, he called her back. She replied. She told them she was in her car this time, but she didn't know where she was parked. Trevor hadn't heard a voice like hers before. She seemed lost and uninterested, like she wasn't fully present. She couldn't make it clear where she was. Her speech was jumbled and hard to understand. Those were the words that would stay with him forever. I'm not here anymore. What she said to him was the last thing she said. Nothing else happened after the call ended. Trevor kept calling her, but she never answered. The doorbell stopped ringing. That call to Trevor happened about 6 hours after Ebi left her grandmother's house. 6 hours that no one knows anything about. Came out later that Ebi called 911 twice that night. Neither lasted more than a minute. No recordings of sound survived. Later, the authorities said they didn't have any technical records, stored files, or logs of the calls. However, the family confirmed that the calls did happen. That little thing made me think about a lot of things. No one is sure what she was trying to say. Potentially she was in danger. She may have been trying to tell you where she was. There's no doubt that she thought someone was following her. She didn't act like someone who was trying to disappear. They looked more like someone was responding to an emergency or a situation that got out of hand. The family moved quickly. When her parents couldn't reach her the next morning, they called her phone over and over again. Initially, it rang. Then it stopped working. They were sure that something was very wrong after that shift. They went to the police the next day to report the person missing, although they were turned away. According to the police, it was too early and certain steps needed to be taken before Ebi could be officially reported missing. The police were more likely to believe that Ebi had left on her own. Legally, she was an adult. She liked being on her own, and she had recently pushed for more freedom. That wasn't what her family thought, though. She wouldn't act like this. She had kept in touch right up until the night before. The complete radio silence and sudden disappearance didn't fit with how she usually did things. It was then that the clock began to tick. Even though Ebi Stepich was officially missing, there was a big difference between how her family saw things and how the police responded. This was the first of many missed opportunities. Still, no one knew how long they would have to wait for answers. On October 27, 2015, 2 days after Ebi went missing, her 2003 Volkswagen Passat was found. Someone saw the car in an empty lot next to Kalaman Park, right next to some trees. He decided to call the police because the car had been in the same spot the day before. No patrol was sent out that night, even though he asked for one. Police finally came after he checked again the next day and confirmed that the car hadn't moved. After about an hour, police arrived at the scene of the second report. The car really did belong to Ebi. Also, the key was still in the lock. There was no petrol left in the tank. The power was off. The car didn't look like it had any damage, though. Purse, clothes, phone, wallet with ID and bank cards and contact lens case were inside the car, and in the trunk with or without her lenses. Ebi had bad vision and couldn't see well, seeing that she had her phone, wallet, and lenses with her, which are all necessary items for daily life. Pointed to one thing. Abby never meant to go away. There was no money on her. She left behind something she needed physically and didn't take any way to get in touch with people. All of these things ruled out the idea of someone choosing to disappear. Still, the police didn't do anything extra. There was no tape around the car. People didn't treat it like a possible crime scene. The inspection didn't go very deep. The trunk was not shut properly. Then a heavy rainstorm came that night. Documents, clothes, and any possible evidence that was inside were all ruined and wet. After a while, Abby's parents were given her things, which were still damaged by water. Things had to be packed and dried by themselves. They took careful pictures of everything they were handling because they knew how important it was and wanted to keep whatever might still be useful. It was all put in a bag and carried home safely. The seriousness of the situation wasn't recognized even after the car was found. Not a single official investigation was begun. Police did not call a forensic team. It wasn't properly secured or analyzed, and many people think that's when important evidence was lost for good. There was no record of any fingerprints, DNA, biological material, or important forensic evidence being found in the things that Abby left in her car. There was no effort to keep the possible evidence safe, which is against even the most basic rules of investigation. For Abby's family, this was the clearest sign yet that the police weren't paying attention to her disappearance. The body of a young woman who went missing is found in a remote park inside her abandoned car. Police still haven't acted quickly or in any way that suggests they are in touch. What was left in the car? How bad it looked and how far away it was all pointed to the same conclusion. Abby had probably left it behind quickly or because she felt under a lot of stress. That part of town was not where she belonged by herself. It didn't fit at all. From that point on, Abby's family was sure she didn't leave on purpose. Even though they thought that, the investigation didn't go any further. The car was discovered. Abby was still missing, though, so that was another chance lost. The first of many. It turned out that her family's house was an unofficial command center. Everything her parents found in the car, like wet clothes, documents, her phone, and hygiene products, was carefully packed, labeled, and photographed so that they could be kept safe. However, the police did nothing. They did not do any forensic testing, collect samples, or write down any evidence. She felt like her family had to become detectives themselves. When they talked to police, they got short, standard responses. There were scripted responses to every request to take Abby's case to a higher level. There was no organized search in the park where her car was found, and no one from her neighborhood or group of friends was asked any questions. There were no requests for surveillance footage from streets nearby. The news talked about her parents posting flyers asking for help, and calling private investigators were some of the things they did, but because they couldn't get to evidence or police databases, they couldn't do much every day. There was less and less hope for a real breakthrough over the next hour. It got harder to put together the timeline of what had really happened. It was terrible to lose so much time. It got heavier every day in Abby's house that she felt like she couldn't do anything. It will be almost 8 months before anything changes. Not until there was a lot of public pressure and her parents kept asking for it was the case finally reclassified. It was confirmed that Abby Stepak was missing. That title made it possible to start a full investigation, but it was too late by then. It had become cold on the trail. Important hints were gone. If there were witnesses, they had passed away or forgotten about what happened, and any evidence that could have shown the truth was probably gone for good. Margie Foley, who was the mother of one of Abby's best friends, went back to Kalaman Park in the spring of 2016. It wasn't just a quick stop by. Something about that spot was making her feel bad. In that area, Abby's car was discovered, and a big concrete drainage pipe that went underground was only a few steps away from the parking lot. Even though the police had never been interested in that building, Foley couldn't get rid of the feeling. It didn't seem right. She could not stand the smell as she got closer to the pipe. Sharp and clear, it smelled like something that can only come from decay. There was no doubt that something bad was going on inside because it was so strong. Right away, Margie called the police. Within an hour, a police officer showed up. She pointed right at the pipe and said what it smelled like, making it clear that it wasn't normal. It wasn't just trash or water that ran off. Although the officer listened, he moved away from the pipe after a short time. He chose not to look inside. He told her calmly that public park storm drains often get clogged with trash, water, and organic matter, especially after it rains a lot. He said smells like this happened all the time. He also said he didn't notice anything fishy and didn't see a reason to look into it any further. Margie did not give up. She again said that the smell was strangely strong, almost sickly sweet, and unlike anything else she had ever smelt. Her advice was to either use a torch or call a K-9 unit. But the police officer didn't back down. He said there were no signs of a crime and nothing needed to be done. He left without checking the pipe first. The event wasn't recorded. There was no follow-up, report, or agency that came to check the pipe. Someone didn't connect it to the abandoned VW that was only a few yards away. It turned out that the drainage pipe was right next to where Ebby's car had been found, less than 65 feet away. It only needed a quick look inside, but one officer's carelessness meant that a possible important piece of evidence was missed, and the spot stayed empty for almost 2 more years. It was another terrible blow for the Stepatch family. More awareness, concern, and investigative sense were shown by a civilian, just a mother, going with her gut, than by a trained professional. One of the worst parts of Ebby's case was this moment. Suddenly, what everyone had been looking for was right there, next to her car. It had been weeks, months, or even years, but Ebby Stepatch still wasn't there. Ever since she went missing, her family has been waiting and feeling helpless. There was no sound for thousands of days. No gossip or leads. Not knowing turned out to be its own kind of pain. The police and other local governments stayed put. Monty Vickers was hired by Ebby's dad as a private investigator because he didn't want the case to be forgotten. Vickers began his work by looking into the last messages Ebby sent. What interested him were the texts she sent the night before she disappeared. In those texts, Ebby talked directly to a few young men she said had intentionally slapped her. She spoke in a severe way. She informed the police that she was leaving. It was said that there was a video. She told them they had to come forward. It was very clear to Ebby that she wasn't going to keep quiet any longer. She was selected to fight. After that, Ebby was nowhere to be found the next day. Her family saw the link right away. Ebby went up to the people she thought were attacking her, and soon after, they were gone. It wasn't a coincidence to them, they were sure. They thought the reason was easy: to stop a threat before it could speak. The police didn't do anything, though. The men Ebby named did not have warrants issued for their phones to be searched. The messages were never properly looked over, even though they might have contained threats, confessions, or clues. They were told that there wasn't enough of a reason. It was yet another chance lost. Ebby named names and made direct accusations, but the investigation only went as far as interviews with people on the surface. People didn't look into digital traces. No gadgets were taken away, no one tracked down their friends and family. It was still written that the young men were witnesses, not suspects. There were systemic problems with the case that Monty Vickers kept pointing out. These included a lack of urgency, bureaucratic inertia, and no attempt to make an investigation plan. He said that the police had not tried to talk to these people again in 3 years. Even when new information came to light, due to those mistakes, the case stayed where it was. That forgotten detail came up again in the autumn of 2018. That concrete drainage pipe in Chalamont Park. In 2015, Ebby's car had been found just a few feet away on that one. Finally, after 3 years, the police decided to search the area properly, and everyone would be shocked by what they found. Human bones were found inside the concrete drainage pipe. Just the location of the body was scary, but it was clear right away that it belonged to a woman after the preliminary examination. And it was proven within days. Her name was Ebby Stepatch. She had been only a few steps away from where her car was found, in the same park that police had been to before, right next to the spot they had ruled out in 2015 and 2016, the exact place that had been mentioned before but never really looked for. Investigators weren't able to find a specific cause of death because the body parts were badly decomposed from time and exposure. A full forensic analysis could not be done because of how the body was found. There was only one thing the medical examiner could say for sure. It was a murder. The body wasn't just thrown into the pipe by chance. It was put there on purpose. But other than that, there were no other conclusive findings, defensive wounds, or biological clues that could point to a suspect. Everything changed after this discovery. That proved Abby didn't just vanish. It was she who was there the whole time. There is a chance that she could have been found in 2015 if that pipe had been thoroughly searched. In 2016, if the officer had paid more attention to the smell instead of dismissing it as sewer, it's possible that they could have found out what really happened and even identified the person who did it. Both times, though, will never be remembered. The discovery was like a bitter ending. Actually, Abby's body had been found, and now it was official. Her case was a murder. Even though it was called that, there was still no real progress. Investigators were not able to find suspects, file charges, or come up with a clear explanation for what had occurred. In her last messages, Abby named men she said hurt her, but they were never brought in as suspects and were never questioned again. Families like hers were met with silence. Justice had stopped at a point where it could no longer go any further. There was no physical evidence, no way to get to important messages, and no forensic timeline. The case was holding up and wouldn't move. The investigation and any chance of a trial in court were pretty much over. There was no way to hold anyone responsible for the deaths that had already been confirmed. It got out in public when Abby's mom, Lori Jernigan, lost her temper. She talked about it on national stages. People talked to her. She was on several popular TV shows, including an emotional one with Dr. Phil. Anyone with information that could help solve the case could win a $50,000 reward from the family. Donors, including private citizens and nonprofits, gave the money to help them get justice. Nothing yet. It's not happening. Not a single person came forward. Either the people who knew something didn't say anything, or loyalty, fear, and the need to stay alive were stronger than guilt. A lot of people remembered Abby. Podcasts, YouTube investigations, and independent documentaries all told her story. People outside the system kept it going, but in a formal sense. There was no response. All of the people Abby had named kept living their lives. Some of them had families and jobs. It was free for them to go. Abby's family and friends were left without her, still sad and waiting, with only unanswered questions and the harsh truth that no one would be held responsible. People still had doubts, but doubts are not proof. You wouldn't have charges, a trial, or justice without hard evidence. The story comes to an end there. No one can prove in court that something is true that everyone can see. It's not fair. It's not having it. Actually, that's the worst part. In this video, we shed light on the devastating case of Elizabeth Arellano, a young girl whose life was marked by unimaginable suffering. The city of Fort Worth is in the northeast of Texas. It is very busy. There are many things to see and do, and the past is very interesting. This is home to almost 1 million people, including Elizabeth Arellano, who is 28 years old. She was born in Fort Worth on August 16, 1987. Family was very important to her. She had 2 sisters, Johanna and Alejandra, who were very close to her. She was very close to her mother, Juanita, and her stepfather, Fidel, who thought of her as one of his own. Even though her parents had split up, she had the utmost respect for him, and I did the same for her. They were as close as any father and daughter could be. Elizabeth loved her family very much. She always put the needs of others ahead of her own and was willing to help anyone who asked. She met Rodolfo Arellano, also known as Rudy, at Diamond Hill Jarvis High School, and they started dating. After getting married, they had 4 kids together, 3 sons and a girl. Elizabeth loved her kids very much. She was determined to teach them to be polite and respectful, and she would do the same things herself. She was a very devoted Christian who often went to church. As a medical assistant, a job she was very proud of and had done for years, her kind and helpful attitude came through in her work. Everything seemed to be going well for her. She had 4 lovely children and a great job. Rudy, on the other hand, was too dominant and their marriage began to fall apart. Before we go any further, I'd love to know which country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this true crime deep dive, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Now let's get into the case. Through April 2016, Elizabeth had made the choice to file for divorce after 13 years of marriage. She had left the family home and gone back to live with her parents, bringing her kids with her. She was ready for a fresh start and ready to face any problems that came her way. Making this choice wasn't easy for her, but on April 15, 2016, she knew it was the right one. In spite of all the problems in her marriage, Elizabeth seemed happy and in good health during the day. She had gone out to a local place for happy hour with some work friends that evening, which gave her a chance to relax and have fun. After having a good time out, she went back to her folks' house early the next morning, April 16th. When she got out of the car, she called one of her coworkers she had been out with to let them know she was safe and back at home. On April 16th, early in the morning, Elizabeth's mother Juanita would find out that her daughter was not in the house. She was nowhere to be found even though they looked everywhere. When Juanita went outside, she saw that Elizabeth's car seemed to be left behind. Inside were a lot of personal things that someone would normally bring with them on a trip. For example, her phone, which was still on the passenger seat, was inside. The key was still in the lock. Elizabeth would never do something like this. She would never just leave without telling anyone where she was going or what she was planning. She would never leave her kids either. It looked like she pulled up outside the house and then disappeared. She told the police that her daughter was missing because she knew something very bad was going on. The search for the missing person began as soon as the police came. Someone who knew her ex-husband Rudy, was one of the people they talked to in order to figure out what happened before she went missing. Police officers went to his house to talk to him. He said that the last time he heard from her was at 2:39 in the morning, after she got home from a night out. According to him, she told him that she was home and would bring the kids to his house right away. When she dropped the kids off at his house, she told him she was going to stay the night in a hotel. When she didn't show up, he told the police that he thought she had chosen not to bring them, and instead stayed where she was. So that they could rule him out, the cops had to know what he had done that day. He said he had spent the day with a friend and that he had been home until 7:30 a.m. He said he got home around midnight and stayed there, while the search for the mother who had gone missing went on. A call to 911 from 3:30 a.m. a few hours before would blow the case wide open. Someone called from Lake Worth at night to say they were fishing. 40 feet of water fell from the Interstate 820 bridge. As someone went down, they said they heard what sounded like screams. The police were sent right away after the call came in, and along with the fire department and divers, they went into the water to see what they could find. Sad to say, they did. The body of a woman was found in the water and pulled out. She was still wearing her work clothes, which were maroon. That person was Elizabeth Arellano. They found that a 119-pound rock was tied around her neck when they pulled her body out of the water. The Tarrant County medical examiner said she was killed and that she died from drowning and being suffocated by the rock. Her body wouldn't come to the surface because the weight was tied around her neck. "We think this was an attempt to hide the body," the cops said. "The scary that she was still alive when she went into the water." Liz Arellano had been killed, and her death was so violent that it shocked even the most experienced police officers. It was now a race against time for the cops to find the person who did it. They were clearly evil in ways that are hard to imagine, and they needed to be stopped. They had a lot of ideas to think about. For example, had someone from the bar followed her home, had a shady person taken her and killed her when they saw her get home, was someone waiting there. One of the first things the cops had to do was figure out where everyone was when she was killed and rule out as many people as they could. Rudy insisted that he was at home and had nothing to do with what happened. People in the neighborhood were shocked that something so horrible could happen as word of it spread. "How can someone do something like that?" a neighbor asked CBS 11. "I don't get how some people can be so mean and evil to another person." To help pay for her funeral, a GoFundMe page was made, and it didn't take long for it to reach over $11,000. Rudy shared this on his Facebook page and on several flyers to raise money for Elizabeth's family. Soon, her family and friends came together for her funeral. Elizabeth's rope marks around her neck were hidden by the sweater that Johanna bought for her. She was so sad that she stood next to Rudy by the coffin of her sister. Rudy seemed like he was a sad widower, but detectives didn't get that sense from the way he behaved. The last time they talked to him, he didn't seem worried or anxious. She was the mother of his children and the person he had spent his whole life with. so it was strange that he didn't seem to care that they were no longer married. As the police continued to look into Elizabeth's death, they started to look at CCTV video from the area. This is where they found their first solid clue. She was last seen at 3:02 a.m. when a white pickup truck was seen leaving the area where her folks lived. Rudy had a white pickup truck. Further, an affidavit would say that this road would be the quickest way to get from where Elizabeth's car was last seen on camera to where she was found. He insisted that he was at home that night, but cell phone data and maps would show that he wasn't telling the truth. He looked at his phone records and saw that on the morning Elizabeth went missing, his phone had pinged close to the house where her parents lived. As the investigation went on, cops found that Rudy had tried to call Elizabeth several times while she was out with her friends on the evening of the 15th. He sent her a message asking when she would be leaving work, and records showed that he was close to her place of work when he tried to call her. He also tried to call her, but she didn't pick up. He moved from where she worked to her parents' house, where she was living as shown by his phone records. Even though the picture they were painting was scary, the agents had to keep building their case against him by finding more proof that what he had told them was not true, and that he was connected to what had happened to Elizabeth. A search warrant was given for his house so that this could happen. A police report says that they showed Elizabeth's oldest son the rope that was used to connect the concrete to her body. He knew the rope because he had been playing with it in the backyard and had seen it go when it was gone. They also showed him a picture of the concrete, which he also knew. There was concrete in the yard after his dad had built a new fence for a friend. It looked just like that. The fence posts had concrete around them. It was the same concrete that was in his truck. As more and more proof came in, police thought she had come home from a night out and that he had waited for her before she could get inside and then taken her. She was then taken to the bridge over Lake Worth that was part of Interstate 820. He tied a rock around her neck and threw her off of it. Only 10 days after his wife's body was found in the water, Rudy Ariano was arrested on murder charges. After that, he was charged and put on a $500,000 bond at Mountfield City Jail. Elizabeth Ariano was found with a rope tied around her neck. Her body weighted down with a boulder, but her husband has now been arrested and charged with capital murder. Before he was arrested, he was posting on social media about helping with her burial. Steve. It was about 3:30 in the morning on April 16th. A couple of fishermen were on Lake Worth when they heard some screaming and then saw what looked like someone falling off the bridge into the water. It looked like the 28-year-old mother of four had jumped off the Lupe 20 bridge over Lake Worth. At least that's what everyone was supposed to think. Elizabeth Ariano's mother, Juanita Galvin, says in Spanish she forgives the person who. She killed her daughter because she doesn't want anger in her heart. She won't speak her son-in-law's name. She was a great mother. She was a great daughter, a great sister, a great aunt. We want to stay focused on the memory of Elizabeth, known as Betty, and stay focused on the kids. Her family says they'll take them in, but they miss their mother. The person everyone says was the glue of their family is gone. Somebody must have seen something because there's always somebody out there, and if they did, somebody seen something, please come forward. This is how she would want us to be together and, taking care, watching her babies. And Fort Worth police are actually asking the public, anybody else who may have seen something that night that looks suspicious, they're asking for them to come forward. Well, Doug, this family is grieving, but they're also on a mission. They are rallying to raise the couple's 4 children, but they also want North Texans to know that Elizabeth's life was so much bigger than how she died. She was a lovely, lovely mother. I want to say a lovely daughter. To the world, she was Elizabeth Ariano, a murder victim whose body, bound with rope and a concrete boulder, was pulled from Lake Worth. Everybody you met will tell you, my sister always had a great smile on her face. I mean, she was on top of all of us constantly. She was like a mini monster, so that was her. That's why she was the good of the family. The couple has 4 children, ages 4 to 12, but family members insist they have not been orphaned. I have 3 kids, now I have 7. We're all going to come together and we're all a family, my sister Alejandra, and we're going to take care of those kids. The local media also talked to a witness who saw how he behaved the day after his wife died. A next-door neighbor who didn't want to be seen on TV says the day after Elizabeth Ariano was killed, Her husband sat in a pickup in his driveway playing music and drinking beer. During this time, her heartbroken family tried to understand what had happened and figure out who was to blame. They told the news about how much Elizabeth meant to them and Elizabeth. Rudy Ariano kept saying he had nothing to do with it, but he had to make a choice soon. He could put himself on trial and plead not guilty. If the jurors found him guilty, he would be put to death. Because of this, he took a plea deal that her family agreed to. It was Wednesday, January 30th, 2019, and Rudy Ariano admitted to stealing and killing his wife Elizabeth. This meant that he would not be put to death. A grieving mother collapses after coming face to face with her daughter's killer. He was also confronted by the victim's furious sisters. "You are a monster. I hate you. I hate you." It was shocking how cold Ariano was. He shared a meme on Facebook that asked, "How long can one go without drinking before they die?" Just 2 hours after killing the mother of his children in a brutal way. He said, "I'm already worried." He claimed to be the sad husband crying by the grave of his wife. He lied to people he had known for years and who loved and cared for him. He didn't say anything to explain or say sorry. After that, Rudy Ariano was given a sentence of life in jail without the chance of parole. His lawyer for defense said that the plea deal was the right thing to do. Elizabeth's family said it made them feel better to know that he would never be freed. Elizabeth's sister, Johanna, gave a very moving victim impact statement. "You robbed all of us from being able to enjoy the wonderful and beautiful human that she was. She will never get to see her again grow up. She will continue to miss all the holidays. She will miss out on all her high school graduation, her future grandchildren, and most important, the right to live, to be happy and enjoy being the great mother that she was. How dare you?" She remembered standing next to him at the funeral for Elizabeth as well. She told him, "You knew what you did, but you watched me cry in front of her body. On the day she was buried, you told me that you wished you were there with her and that you just wanted to lay there. You knew it would be until death do you part when you married her, but you didn't think it would happen so soon. You're a coward." The children of Elizabeth's husband, Fidel, were also talked about. The children cry often. They miss their mother very much. You took her away from them, and now you will spend the rest of your life behind bars wondering what would have become of them. I hope you like that. Elizabeth's family talked to the reporters outside of court. They were her world, and we're going to continue to talk about her every single day like we still do and remember her, and keep her memory alive always. She was a loving mother, daughter, sister, aunt, friend, and coworker. She had a huge effect on the people she knew and the people she helped. Johanna, her sister, said that her family will always remember her and talk about her with their children. The wonderful, kind, and wonderful woman she was will never be forgotten by those who knew and loved her. We are uncovering the haunting mystery of a woman who disappeared without a trace from her own home. She disappeared for unknown reasons just 2 days before her birthday. As soon as the cops started their investigation, they found a number of suspicious signs that something bad may have happened to her. The probe went on for more than 10 years, even though there were warning signs. It wasn't until 12 years later that the shocking truth arrived. The whole country was shocked by the result. No one saw this coming. Caitlin Markham was born in Fairfield, Ohio, on August 16, 1989. She had a wonderful home with her parents and younger sister, and she had a lot of friends. Caitlin was good at making friends even when she was a child. She could talk to the shyest kids on the playground and quickly get them laughing and playing with her. Caitlin was also very artistic. She loved singing, writing, and pretty much anything else that had to do with art. Her interest guided her job path. After high school, she went to a nearby college to study graphic design. Caitlin's life was meant to take a big turn in the summer of 2011. She was studying for her finals and making big plans to move to Colorado with John Carter, the man she was going to marry. They got engaged the year before and had been together for 6 years. Their dream was to start a new life together in a different place, and they couldn't wait to get married after the move. Caitlin was meant to go to her part-time job at a bridal shop on August 14th in the morning. People she cared about tried to get in touch with her that day, but she didn't answer any calls or texts. When Caitlin's family started to worry, they called her job and found out that she hadn't shown up for her shift that morning. This was very strange because Caitlin always talked to people and never missed work without telling someone. Still, her family first thought she might be with someone else because she wasn't able to get back to them. They chose to wait it out. But as evening came on and Caitlin still hadn't replied, their worry reached a breaking point. After work, her fiancé John went to her flat to make sure everything was okay. Caitlin left her car in front of the small apartment block where she lived. But when John went into the unlocked flat, he only found her dog there. There was no sign of Caitlin, and there were no strange events that would lead you to believe something bad had happened. Even so, the fact that she hadn't talked to anyone all day worried everyone who knew her a lot. John chose to call the police. He said that he and his fiancée hadn't talked since the morning, so they sent a patrol officer. The police officer searched Caitlin's flat, but didn't find any evidence of a break-in, a fight, or anything else that would suggest a crime. While some things were strange, one thing stood out: Caitlin's keys, wallet, and ID were all inside. The fact that she wasn't at home sent red flags to the police officer. Caitlin would have taken her keys and locked the door behind her if she had left by herself. John said their last meeting was the night before. They were at her house with a friend they both knew. John went to a party with some other friends after his friend left, but Caitlin stayed home because it was getting late. After a few hours, John went back to his own house where he lived with his mother. He sent Caitlin a few texts, but she stopped answering after a while. John said he texted her every morning and always got a reply, but not this time. The police talked to Caitlin's family and friends, but none of them had seen or heard from her since the previous evening. A lot of people said Caitlin wouldn't have just left without saying anything because that's not like her at all. She was focused on her last tests, and her birthday was coming up soon. She had planned to celebrate with her family and friends at a nearby restaurant. After getting all of this information, the police started to think that Caitlin might have been hurt, so they chose to search for her. They got more than 100 people, put them into groups, and began searching the city. Caitlin's family and friends also made flyers with information about her, which were soon put up on almost every street. At the same time, police were looking for any clues they could find. Of course, they started by looking into John Carter, her fiancé. The cops noticed some small scratches on his neck on the first day, but John told them that he had done them while shaving. A voice stress test was also asked of him. This is a test that listens to recorded comments and looks for any signs of lying. The results weren't clear, and the police couldn't tell if he was telling the truth or just worried about his fiancée going missing. From the beginning, he helped with the search, answered all of the police's questions, and even did several interviews with local news outlets that were already covering the case. The police then checked John Carter's story and found that he was, in fact, at a party with friends that night. They were also able to confirm his story that he went home afterward and watched a movie on his laptop by looking at the information on it. The friend of both of them who had visited Caitlin and John that night told detectives that he had been at her house. He said they just talked about things like the couple's upcoming move and Caitlin's tests. He did notice, though, that Caitlin was quieter than normal and had spent most of the night studying on her laptop. He thought she was just worried about the tests that were coming up in a few weeks. With this knowledge, it didn't look like Carter had much to do with it, so investigators turned their attention to other leads. They got a warrant to look into Caitlin's phone and found that it had been turned off at 12:06 a.m. They hadn't done anything since then. They also saw that she had sent John a picture about 30 minutes before, which matched his story. Even though they looked hard, they couldn't find any more signs of Caitlin, so the cops searched even harder. In the days that followed, even more people helped, and the absence was reported on by the news media across the country. Search teams looked in forests, lakes, and empty houses, but they couldn't find anything. Even though the search went on for weeks, the cops still couldn't find Caitlin. John kept searching for things with a lot of effort, but as time went on, more and more people in the town began to think he might have been involved with his fiancée's disappearance. He heard about these rumors. In the end, he talked about the claims and said that all he wanted to do was bring Caitlin home and that he didn't have time to think about them. Investigators also made it clear that they didn't have any good reasons to believe John was guilty. His alibi was true. He let them search his house without a warrant, and he always did what the police asked of him. Still, John said that the claims did bother him sometimes. A woman came up to him while he was putting up flyers on the street and started talking about the case. She said that most people thought her boyfriend did it, but they didn't know she was talking to him. The search for Caitlin went on for a few months, but in the end, the police had to give up. They had looked everywhere but hadn't found a single tip. The police chose to keep working on the case and follow up on any new leads they found. At that point, Caitlin's case was known all over the country, and police had gotten hundreds of tips. They looked into all of them carefully, but none of them helped them find the lost girl. The government also kept raising the reward for information, and in just a few months it had hit $50,000. There was no progress in the case for almost a year until an unexpected turn of events. The man, who is 28 years old, was caught in Miami for hitting a college student. At first, this didn't seem to have anything to do with Caitlin's case until police found out that this man had been living across the street from her apartment building when she went missing. Detectives went to Miami to talk to him and find out where he was the night Caitlin disappeared. But after a thorough study, they found that he didn't have any chance to do the crime. So he wasn't considered a suspect. For another year until April 10, 2013, the case stayed cold. On that day, a man from Indiana's small-town Cedar Grove went to a road near some woods to look for scrap metal. He saw a bundle of black tarp as he walked by some trees. He chose to look inside it, and to his horror, he found human bones. He called the cops right away, and the officer took the body parts to a lab to be studied. As they searched that area, they also found another bag with only a head in it. Experts quickly confirmed that the remains were those of a person, and using dental records, they were able to identify the victim, Caitlin. This proved that Caitlin had been dead the whole time, and the cops were now sure they were dealing with a murder. Someone had taken parts of her body and taken them to a nearby state. The killer didn't even bother to hide the body parts. They were just dumped next to some trash. Because the body was so decomposed, the forensic experts couldn't find any important signs or figure out the exact cause of death. The only interesting thing that was found was proof of a stab wound on one of the arm bones. The medical examiners agreed that it was definitely a murder, even though the exact cause of death could not be found. The fact that the bodies were found in a different state made the probe more difficult. The police from Ohio and Indiana had to work together. But even though they didn't get very far. But they did decide that the body had probably been kept somewhere else before it was moved to the woods. The killer may have moved the body parts to a more rural area because they were afraid they would be found. The father of Caitlin hired a private investigator in 2015 because he didn't think the local police were working hard enough to solve the case. The detective did his own research and talked to Caitlin's family and friends. He finally came up with two possible suspects. He told the cops about this, but they chose not to share what the detective had found. The reward for tips went up to $75,000 that same year. But this didn't help the detectives get any closer to solving the case. The father of Caitlin fought hard to get the case moved from the local police to the county officials. By the end of 2015, he had finally been successful. When the case was turned over to a new group of agents, they started from scratch. In 2016, police told reporters they had a strong suspect in the murder, but neither enough information, nor enough proof to make an arrest. They didn't say who the suspect was because of this, and the probe stopped again for years. In 2018, cops found the body of another young woman in a town not far from Caitlin's house. Investigators looked into a possible link between this crime and Caitlin's because it had a lot in common with her case. They quickly found a suspect named Michael. He was said to have been following the victim around for weeks before he killed her. Detectives started to look for any possible connections between Michael and Caitlin, but at first, they couldn't find any. But soon, they found something strange in one of the killer's social media. Shots from a music festival. He was standing next to John Carter. When the police asked Carter about this, he said that he had met Michael at the event, but that they hadn't talked much. Even though it was a strange coincidence, police couldn't find any other link between Michael and Caitlin, which meant they couldn't connect him to her death. This went on until 2023, when the first arrest in Caitlin's case was announced out of the blue by the police. A man named Jonathan Pomerton was arrested by the police. They told the press that Pomerton was very close with both Caitlin and her fiancé. At first, the police didn't say much about the arrest, but 2 months later, they did something even more shocking. They arrested Caitlin's fiancé, John Carter, on suspicion of killing her. Investigators didn't tell the press what they had found over the past few years until after this. When the case was given to the county police, the new officers went through all the evidence that was already there and started from scratch. They thought Carter's actions, especially his 911 call, were odd right away. The police thought that his words sounded practiced, like he was reading from a script. From what he said to the patrol officer at first, they both got the same feeling. Next, the police listened to recordings of talks between Caitlin and Carter's friends, which they both had. A lot of these friends had said some worrying things. According to their accounts, Caitlin talked about having major problems with Carter in the months before she disappeared in 2011. The problems were so bad that she even thought about breaking up with him. She told her friends that Carter had started using drugs, was acting out more, and was watching frightening adult content all the time. Statements from witnesses that the police had had since 2011 were another interesting part of the case. 2 teens sneaked out of her house around 2 a.m. on the night she went missing. They saw 2 cars pull up with their headlights off as they went by Carter's mother's house. In one of the cars, Carter got out and went inside. He quickly came back out and got behind the wheel. Once they were gone, neither car turned on its lights. Carter's alibi, which said he was at home watching a movie, was thrown out by these comments. But investigators found that his alibi was based on open tabs on his laptop that were linked to the movie. There was no solid proof that he was at home watching it. Carter didn't really have a good excuse, it turned out. 2 people who saw him that night, however, said things that made them suspicious. That wasn't all, though. Carter's phone was turned off 2 minutes before Caitlin's on the night she went missing, and it stayed off for 15 hours. Carter also deleted some texts he had sent to his fiancée that night, so no one knows what they said. He said at first that Caitlin hadn't replied to his good morning message, but it turned out that he had never sent one. Neighbors said they heard noise coming from Caitlin's flat that night, which is another interesting detail. In the beginning, they said they heard fighting, banging, and then someone quietly saying no. Carter, on the other hand, said there wasn't an argument between them. For some reason, the first group of detectives didn't think this was strange at all. After looking over all of this information, the agents came to the conclusion that Carter was the only real suspect from the start. However, they still needed more proof. The second time they talked to Caitlin's friends, they learned something shocking. One of the women said that Carter told her he liked her a few months after Caitlin went missing. She was shocked to learn this, especially since Carter was still helping to look for his lost fiancée and talking about how much he missed Caitlin. The detectives also talked to all the witnesses again and were able to get a search order for Carter's mother's house, where he was living at the time of the murder. They found a black blanket that was exactly the same as the one that had been over Caitlin's body. The cops found some disturbing poems that Carter had written by hand in his room. Inside one song, the speaker said something upsetting. "Deep down, I love her. You have to kill her. But I love her. She has to die." The officers also found out that Carter had been very mean to his new wife by that point. He was married and had kids. The cops found video of him yelling at his wife while holding their daughter. Finally, the police found that Caitlin's body was found near the road that led to Carter's father's farm, which he often visited. Putting all of this knowledge together, this fact proved that he knew the area well. When the police chose to talk to Carter, he denied having anything to do with the murder. When they pointed out all the strange and contradictory details, he quietly said that they were just evidence. Unfortunately for the police, they knew they probably wouldn't be able to get him convicted because there wasn't enough evidence to link him to the crime. Based on witness reports that he left his house at 2 a.m., they could arrest him for giving false information. But there was another problem. Carter wasn't seen by himself, according to witnesses. He and another car had both pulled up. Based on this clue, police looked at his friend Jonathan Pomerton because they thought he might be the other person. Soon, they found out that Pomerton was in that picture from the music festival as well, along with Carter and a man who had been convicted of killing another young woman. Based on what they learned from Palmerton's conversations with the police, the detectives chose to arrest him for giving false statements, though they didn't say why at the time. Even though there wasn't much proof, Carter was arrested himself 2 months later. The case was still very much open. It looked like the police wanted Palmerton to turn himself in. At that point, they thought someone had helped the fiancée get rid of the body, and it looked like his friend was involved. But both men kept saying they had nothing to do with the killings. Carter put up a $1 million bond, which freed him until his sentencing. Because of all of this, the detectives did something very stupid. They knew that Carter would probably be found not guilty by a jury, so they chose to make a deal with him. In return for a confession, the prosecution agreed to lower the charge to manslaughter by accident, which Carter took. He went before a judge in June 2024 and pleaded guilty, but he wouldn't say anything about what happened because that wasn't part of the deal. Finally, the judge gave him the shortest possible sentence for that charge, which in Ohio was only 3 years. The whole country was angry about this decision, which was understandable, but the judge couldn't change it. Carter could have avoided even that sentence if he hadn't taken the plea deal. There wasn't enough proof to charge him with first-degree murder. All charges against Palmerton were dropped for the same reason. Police couldn't find any proof that he had helped get rid of the body. After the sentencing, Caitlin's father said that he was more worried about not knowing the whole story behind his daughter's death than about the prison term itself. He said that at first he didn't think Carter was guilty, but that over the years he had come to believe it. He remembered that Carter had kept in touch with him and even hugged him at Caitlin's funeral, even though Carter had killed her. Not long after Carter was sent to jail, his cellmate called the police and said Carter had told him some details about the murder. It was said by the prisoner that they had a fight that night, and Carter lost control. He beat up Caitlin and choked her. He then got scared and thought about calling the cops. He also thought about setting up the scene to make it look like Caitlin did it herself, but in the end, he chose to kill her and throw her body away. The police weren't sure if they should believe this story. They thought Carter might have told this story because it fit with what they already knew, but it was still unclear whether he was telling the truth. The cops thought that the murder might not have been an act of anger that was done on the spot. One of the detectives who questioned Carter was sure that he was a psychopath. He said that during his work, he had talked to a lot of criminals, but Carter stood out. Carter will be freed when he turns 39 in 2027, even though there was no way to change the term. The parent of the victim had given up on ever finding out the whole truth. Carter might be able to admit, but they probably wouldn't believe him. They were left to watch as he did a short sentence in jail and would eventually go back into society where he could hurt other people. The cops are still looking into a possible link between Carter, Palmerton, and the man who was found guilty of killing another woman. They don't say that the three of them couldn't have become friends because they all had violent fantasies, but there isn't any evidence to back this theory yet. The house with its manicured lawn and pristine shutters belonged to Thaddeus and Valencia Blackwood, a couple who seemed to have mastered the art of the American dream. At 37, Thaddeus carried himself with the calculated precision of his profession, his tall frame and prematurely graying temples lending him an air of distinction that commanded respect in Boston's financial district. Valencia, 35, possessed a graceful intensity that turned heads at their neighborhood gatherings, her amber eyes and high cheekbones hinting at mixed European ancestry that she never discussed. Their neighbors knew them as the perfect professional couple. Thaddeus's position as a senior investment manager and Valencia's role as a pharmaceutical researcher meant they were rarely home during daylight hours. Their matching Mercedes-Benz vehicles left the driveway at precise times each morning, returning after sunset to disappear into their three-car garage. The Blackwoods' decision not to have children raised few eyebrows in their social circle. It was 2002, after all, and their generation increasingly chose career success over family life. When asked about it at neighborhood functions, Valencia would smile enigmatically and say they were focusing on their careers and enjoying their freedom to travel. Their friends envied their lifestyle, weekend trips to Europe, summer homes in exclusive locations, and dinner parties that became the talk of their social set. But beneath the polished exterior lay a void that neither their professional achievements nor their material wealth could fill. The carefully maintained lawn, the designer furniture, the expensive art pieces, all served as elaborate props in a performance of perfection that was beginning to crack under its own weight. As autumn painted the neighborhood in brilliant shades of red and gold, no one suspected that behind those pristine walls, a darkness was growing. The Blackwood's perfect life masked a twisted reality that would eventually lead to headlines, horror, and bloodshed. Their story would become a cautionary tale about the depths of human depravity and the prices paid for unspeakable desires. Born into upper-middle-class families, both Thaddeus and Valencia followed meticulously plotted paths to success. Thaddeus grew up in Connecticut, the only child of a tax attorney and a real estate agent. His childhood was a series of private schools and summer camps, each carefully chosen to maximize his future prospects. At Dartmouth, he distinguished himself not through social connections, but through ruthless efficiency and analytical precision. Valencia's background proved more complex. Raised in Rhode Island by academic parents, she demonstrated an almost obsessive interest in chemistry from an early age. Her father, a physics professor, and her mother, a biochemist, cultivated her interests with single-minded determination. By 16, she was taking college-level courses. At MIT, she quickly earned a reputation as a brilliant but solitary figure, more comfortable with laboratory equipment than human interaction. Their paths crossed at a pharmaceutical investment conference in 1995. Thaddeus, already making waves at his firm, attended to scout potential investments in biotech startups. Valencia presented research findings that promised to revolutionize drug delivery systems. During the coffee break, they found themselves discussing the intersection of science and profit with an intensity that surprised them both. Their courtship progressed with the same efficiency that marked their professional lives. Within 6 months, they married in a small ceremony in Vermont, attended only by immediate family and a select few colleagues. Their honeymoon consisted of a series of meetings with European investors, punctuated by expensive dinners and brief tourist excursions. The decision to remain childless came naturally to both. Valencia viewed pregnancy as an unnecessary biological disruption to her career trajectory. Thaddeus, though he never admitted it openly, felt relieved at avoiding the messiness and emotional demands of parenthood. They focused instead on building their empire, a showcase home in Wellesley, carefully planned vacations, and strategic social connections. For 7 years, their partnership functioned like a well-oiled machine. They maintained separate bank accounts alongside their joint ones, divided household responsibilities with corporate efficiency, and supported each other's career advancement with calculated precision. Their sex life, while not passionate, served its purpose as a physical release and marital obligation. But by 2002, cracks began appearing in their perfect facade. The achievement of their material goals left them feeling strangely empty. Their conversations grew shorter, more functional. Dinners became silent affairs punctuated only by the clink of expensive silverware on fine china. They had everything they'd planned for, yet something vital was missing. The void made itself known in quiet moments, when they sat in their perfect living rooms surrounded by expensive furnishings that felt increasingly meaningless, or during their regular dinner parties, where they performed the roles of perfect hosts while feeling increasingly disconnected from their guests and each other. Valencia noticed Thaddeus spending more time in his home office late at night, the blue glow of his computer screen visible under the door, until early morning hours. Thaddeus observed Valencia becoming more withdrawn, her work hours growing longer, her responses to his questions increasingly distant. They needed something to reignite their connection, to make them feel alive again. Something beyond the ordinary experiences that money could buy, something forbidden. The descent into darkness began with a seemingly innocent late-night internet search. Thaddeus, restless after another silent dinner, found himself exploring the darker corners of the web. His financial expertise had taught him about cryptocurrency and its shadowy applications. Using his work laptop and a private VPN, he began navigating encrypted networks and hidden forums. Initially, he justified his exploration as research understanding the underground economy could benefit his investment strategies. But as weeks passed, His searches grew more focused, more specific. He discovered forums where wealth bought access to experiences beyond the mainstream market, where everything and everyone had a price. Valencia first noticed the change in his behavior during their morning routine. His usual stoic demeanor showed hints of excitement, a spark she hadn't seen in years. When he finally shared his discoveries with her, she surprised both him and herself with her response. Instead of horror or disgust, she felt curiosity. Her scientific mind began analyzing possibilities, risks, and methods. Together, they spent their evenings exploring this shadow world. Valencia applied her research skills to understanding its infrastructure. Thaddeus used his financial acumen to establish secure payment methods. They created elaborate spreadsheets analyzing risks and contingencies, approaching their dark plans with the same methodical precision they applied to their careers. Their wealth and professional backgrounds proved advantageous. Thaddeus established a complex network of offshore accounts and cryptocurrency wallets. Valencia researched methods of control and containment, applying her pharmaceutical knowledge to new purposes. They convinced themselves their approach would be different, more sophisticated, more humane than the crude methods they read about in news stories. The transformation of their basement began subtly. A security system upgrade here, a structural reinforcement there. They hired different contractors for each modification, ensuring no single worker could grasp the full scope of their projects. Their professional reputations deflected any potential suspicion. Who would question home improvements by such a respectable couple? As summer turned to fall, their plans took final shape. Using dark web connections, they made contact with traffickers operating between West Africa and Europe. Their requirements were specific, young, educated, with no immediate family. The negotiations, conducted through encrypted channels, felt almost like legitimate business transactions. Almost. They justified their actions in whispered conversations. They would provide comfortable conditions, they told themselves. Their wealth would ensure a level of luxury even in captivity. It wasn't about cruelty, they insisted, but about exploring forbidden desires in a controlled environment. Their victim would want for nothing except freedom. As their plans progressed, both Thaddeus and Valencia noticed subtle changes in their relationship. The silences at dinner became charged with shared secrets rather than emptiness. They began touching more frequently, small gestures of complicity. Their growing excitement masked any moral qualms, replacing them with anticipation of the power they would soon wield. On October 15, 2002, a nondescript delivery van pulled into the Blackwoods driveway at 2:17 a.m. The rain provided perfect cover, muffling sounds and deterring any curious neighbors. Adana arrived semi-conscious, drugged for the final leg of her journey from Lagos. At 19, she had believed she was accepting a scholarship to study in America. Reality would prove far more horrific. Valencia supervised the transfer, her researcher's detachment allowing her to treat the situation like a laboratory delivery. The traffickers, speaking only in hurried whispers, helped move Adana to the basement. Thaddeus handled the payment cryptocurrency transferred through a cascade of digital wallets he'd spent months setting up. The basement space barely resembled its original form. High-end furnishings and expensive finishes masked its true nature as a prison. The renovations had created a self-contained apartment, complete with bathroom and small kitchen area, but the reinforced doors, soundproofed walls, and sophisticated surveillance system revealed its true purpose. A golden cage, designed to contain their living acquisition. As consciousness returned, Adana found herself in surroundings that seemed to mock her situation. Egyptian cotton sheets on a queen-sized bed, a flat-screen television mounted on the wall, a bookshelf filled with contemporary novels, all the comforts of wealth contained within a space she could never leave. The Blackwoods had planned every detail meticulously. Valencia established a feeding schedule based on her knowledge of human biology and psychology. Thaddeus created organizational systems for their new routine, treating it like any other project management challenge. They developed codes and signals for communicating about their secret when others were present. During those first days, they maintained their normal schedules with robotic precision. Thaddeus left for his office downtown at exactly 7:30 a.m. Valencia worked from her home laboratory, monitoring their captive through hidden cameras. They hosted a dinner party that weekend, their guests sipping wine directly above where Adana lay imprisoned. The couple's excitement manifested in different ways. Thaddeus became more aggressive in his business dealings, riding a wave of power that spilled over from their secret activities. Valencia approached their captive with clinical curiosity, taking notes on behavioral responses and physical reactions as if conducting research. But they had miscalculated one crucial factor. Their victim was not the uneducated, helpless girl they had expected. Adana had completed 2 years of psychology studies at the University of Lagos. Behind her seemingly compliant exterior, she began observing her captors with the same analytical precision they applied to her. She noticed their patterns, their weaknesses, their growing tensions. As October drew to a close, the Blackwoods settled into what they imagined would be their new normal. They had achieved something few others would dare attempt. Their perfect life now contained an element of danger that made them feel truly alive. But they failed to recognize that they had invited destruction into their carefully ordered world. Life in the Blackwood household developed new rhythms around their dark secret. Each day followed a carefully orchestrated schedule that Valencia had developed using project management software. Feeding times, hygiene periods, and their own private visits were logged with scientific precision. They maintained spreadsheets tracking everything from Adana's food preferences to her menstrual cycle. The basement became their sanctuary and prison, not just for their captive, but increasingly for themselves. They found themselves drawn there more frequently, their normal social activities feeling pale and meaningless in comparison. Their interactions with Adana evolved from purely physical to something more complex, a twisted form of domestic life that satisfied their need for control while feeding their growing obsession. Valencia began working from home more often, citing a new research project that required constant monitoring. In reality, she spent hours watching the security feeds, analyzing every movement, every gesture. Her professional work suffered, but the thrill of their secret life compensated for any career setbacks. Thaddeus developed new patterns, too. He started leaving work early, making excuses about client meetings that never existed. His colleagues noticed changes in his behavior, a new intensity in his eyes, occasional lapses in his usually impeccable attention to detail. During meetings, his mind would drift to their basement, to the power they wielded over another human being. Close calls became part of their daily existence. A package delivery requiring a signature while Adana could be heard showering. A neighbor's dog that kept barking at their basement windows. Each incident sent their hearts racing, adding an edge of danger that both thrilled and terrified them. But maintaining their secret took its toll. Valencia developed insomnia, spending long hours pacing their bedroom while Thaddeus slept. Her hands began to shake slightly when handling laboratory equipment. Thaddeus started drinking more heavily, needing alcohol to quiet the thoughts that raced through his mind during quiet moments. Their relationship shifted too. The initial excitement of shared transgression gave way to subtle blame and resentment. They argued about small details, whose turn it was to bring meals downstairs, whether the surveillance system needed upgrading, how to handle upcoming social obligations. Meanwhile, Adana watched and learned. Her psychology training helped her understand the dynamic between her captors. She noticed how Valencia's hands trembled slightly when delivering meals, how Thaddeus' voice changed pitch when he was lying to his wife. She observed their growing carelessness. A door left unlocked, a security code entered where she could see it. Conversations held just within her hearing. The Blackwoods' perfect facade began showing cracks to the outside world. They declined more social invitations, made excuses for missed appointments. Their usual immaculate appearance slipped occasionally. Valencia appearing at the grocery store in wrinkled clothes. Thaddeus forgetting to shave before important meetings. Their neighbors noticed small changes, too. Unusual delivery vans arriving at odd hours. New security cameras appearing around the property. The Blackwoods' growing reluctance to allow service workers into their home. But in their wealthy enclave, privacy was respected, and questions remained unasked. As winter approached, the pressure continued building. Valencia caught herself talking to the security monitors late at night, holding one-sided conversations with Adana's image. Thaddeus developed a habit of checking and rechecking the basement locks, sometimes returning home from work multiple times to ensure everything was secure. Their captive observed these deteriorating patterns with growing interest. Each slip in their perfect routine, each small mistake in their security protocols, became a piece in the puzzle she was slowly assembling. While the Blackwoods focused on maintaining their secret, they failed to notice the changing dynamic within their carefully constructed prison. The unraveling began on a stormy November night. Valencia had been increasingly careless with security protocols, her scientific precision eroded by months of strain. That evening, she forgot to reactivate the basement door alarm after delivering dinner, a small oversight that would prove catastrophic. Earlier that day, Thaddeus had made a critical error at work, misplacing a decimal point that cost his clients millions. His boss had called him into the office, questioning not just the mistake, but his recent pattern of distraction. He arrived home in a dark mood, carrying an expensive bottle of scotch from his office collection. The couple's argument started over something trivial. Valencia had forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning, but years of suppressed tension quickly transformed the disagreement into something uglier. Their voices echoed through the house, creating a cacophony that covered the slight sound of a basement door opening. Adana had spent months preparing for this moment. During her captivity, she had carefully catalogued every detail of their routine, every weakness in their security. She had maintained a compliant demeanor while secretly building her strength, hiding small portions of food to keep her mind sharp and her body ready. The kitchen knife she had managed to conceal weeks earlier, during one of Valencia's increasingly frequent moments of carelessness, felt cold against her skin. Adana had chosen it carefully, waiting for the perfect opportunity to slip it from the block when Valencia was distracted by one of her many phone calls. As the argument upstairs reached its crescendo, Adana moved silently through the house she had only seen through glimpses and security camera feeds. The layout, memorized from overheard conversations and the sound of footsteps above, was clear in her mind. She knew exactly where the Blackwoods would be, in their study, where they always retreated during their increasingly frequent arguments. The study door stood partially open, warm light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Thaddeus stood with his back to the door, gesturing wildly with a crystal tumbler of scotch. Valencia sat at her desk, her face buried in her hands. Neither noticed the shadow that slipped into the room. What followed happened with surprising speed. Thaddeus noticed her first, his eyes widening in shock as he turned. The tumbler slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Valencia looked up at the sound. Her scream caught in her throat as Adana moved with the precision her captors had once prided themselves on. The knife found its mark twice before either of them could react, once in Thaddeus's abdomen, once in Valencia's shoulder as she lunged forward. Not fatal wounds, but enough to incapacitate. Adana had studied human anatomy during her psychology courses, knowledge that served her well in this moment of desperate action. Blood spread across the imported Persian rug as the Blackwoods collapsed. Valencia tried to reach for her phone, but found her arm wouldn't respond. Thaddeus attempted to stand, but slipped in the mixture of blood and spilled scotch. Their perfect world literally and figuratively shattered around them. Adana took Valencia's phone, her hand steady as she dialed 911. She spoke clearly, giving the address and describing the situation. Then she walked out the front door into the rain, waiting on the front steps for the authorities to arrive. The same surveillance cameras that had monitored her captivity now recorded her calm demeanor as police cars and ambulances converged on the property. In those final moments before the sirens arrived, she stood in the rain, letting it wash away months of captivity. Behind her, through the open door, she could hear the Blackwoods' moans of pain mixing with the sound of thunder. Their carefully constructed fantasy had crumbled, destroyed not by external discovery, but by their own growing carelessness and the quiet strength of the woman they had underestimated. The case broke like a thunderclap across affluent Wellesley. Police cruisers and crime scene tape transformed Oakmont Drive into a media circus. Neighbors emerged from their colonial homes in bathrobes and slippers, watching in stunned disbelief as stretchers carried the bleeding Blackwoods to waiting ambulances. Detective Raina Patel took lead on the investigation, her methodical approach perfectly suited to unraveling the complex web of evidence. The Blackwoods house yielded a treasure trove of documentation, Valencia's meticulous notes on their captive, Thaddeus' elaborately concealed financial records, and hours of surveillance footage that would later prove crucial in prosecution. The basement told its own story. High-end furnishings couldn't disguise the essential nature of the space as a prison. CSI teams discovered Valencia's fingerprints on sedative bottles, Thaddeus' DNA on restraints hidden in custom cabinets. Their attention to detail in concealing their crimes would ultimately serve as evidence against them. Both Blackwoods survived their injuries, though Thaddeus needed extensive surgery. As they recovered under police guard at Massachusetts General Hospital, their carefully constructed lives began unraveling. Their employers immediately terminated their positions. Social connections evaporated overnight. Former friends gave interviews expressing shock and denial, all claiming they never suspected anything amiss. Adana's testimony proved devastating. Her psychology background lent additional weight to her account of the psychological torture she endured. She described their methods with clinical precision, her composed demeanor on the witness stand making her story even more compelling. The jury listened in horror as she detailed how the Blackwoods had combined their professional expertise, Valencia's pharmaceutical knowledge, and Thaddeus' financial acumen to enable their crimes. The investigation expanded internationally, uncovering links to trafficking networks across 3 continents. Thaddeus's financial records led authorities to other wealthy clients, triggering investigations in multiple countries. The case became a watershed moment in human trafficking enforcement, highlighting how wealth and respectability could mask monstrous crimes. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented 1,247 pieces of evidence, including Valencia's notebooks, which provided damning documentation of their crimes. Their defense attorneys attempted to portray them as mentally ill, but their methodical planning undermined any claims of insanity. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The sentencing hearing drew national media attention. Judge Helena Rodriguez delivered a scathing condemnation before sentencing them each to 30 years without possibility of parole. The Blackwoods' final public appearance showed them in prison jumpsuits, their former elegance stripped away, revealing the hollow shells beneath. Adana emerged from the experience with remarkable resilience. Using portions of the civil judgment awarded to her from the Blackwoods' seized assets, she established a foundation helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. Her story became a powerful testimony to human strength and dignity in the face of unspeakable cruelty. The house on Oakmont Drive stood empty for years, its value plummeting despite the prestigious address. Eventually, a developer purchased it for demolition, erasing the physical reminder of what had happened there. But the case left indelible marks on the community's psyche, shattering illusions of safety and innocence in their privileged enclave. Today, the case is studied in criminal justice programs across the country. It serves as a cautionary tale about the masks people wear, the evil that can hide behind respectable facades, and the danger of assuming wealth and social status guarantee moral character. The Blackwoods' fall from grace became a stark reminder that true character reveals itself not in public gestures or professional achievements, but in the choices made behind closed doors. For Wellesley residents, every perfect couple, every showcase home, every manicured lawn, now carries a shadow of doubt. They learned that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are not the obvious ones, but those who hide in plain sight, attending neighborhood gatherings and charity functions while harboring dark secrets behind their pleasant smiles and prestigious addresses. Reginald Ellington, known to friends as Reggie, was a self-made tech entrepreneur who had built his fortune developing innovative software for the healthcare industry. At 42, he exuded confidence and charm, with hair that gave him a distinguished air. His wife, Penelope, 38, was a former pediatric nurse who had left her career to focus on their family and philanthropic endeavors. With her warm smile and compassionate nature, Penelope was beloved in their social circle for her kindness and generosity. The Ellingtons met in their late 20s at a medical technology conference. Their shared passion for improving healthcare and their complementary personalities, Reggie's drive and Penelope's empathy, made them a perfect match. They married within a year of meeting and immediately began planning for a family. However, their dreams of parenthood were met with heartbreak after heartbreak. Despite their access to the best medical care money could buy, Penelope suffered through 3 miscarriages in the span of 4 years. The emotional toll was devastating, and the couple found themselves drifting apart, their once unshakable bond tested by the strain of their unfulfilled desire for a child. It was during a particularly dark period, after their 3rd failed round of IVF, that Penelope broached the subject of adoption. Reggie was initially hesitant, harboring concerns about raising a child that wasn't biologically theirs. But as he saw the hope rekindling in Penelope's eyes, he found himself warming to the idea. The couple threw themselves into researching adoption with the same vigor they applied to all aspects of their lives. They attended seminars, joined support groups, and consulted with adoption specialists. As they learned more about the challenges faced by older children in the foster care system, they felt a calling to provide a home for a child who had already faced significant hardship in life. Their decision to adopt an older child was met with mixed reactions from friends and family. Some praised their altruism while others warned of the potential difficulties. But the Ellingtons were determined. They believed that their love, resources, and commitment could overcome any obstacles they might face. Little did they know that their decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test their resolve, strain their marriage to the breaking point, and ultimately lead to a tragedy that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The Ellingtons' journey to adopt began with a flurry of paperwork, home studies, and background checks. They worked with a reputable agency specializing in older child adoptions, attending required training sessions and preparing their home for a new family member. Months into the process, they received a call about a potential match. Zoe Blackwell, a 10-year-old girl with large, expressive eyes and a mop of unruly curls, had been in the foster care system for most of her life. Her file was sparse on details about her early years, noting only that she had been removed from her birth family due to neglect and had bounced between several foster homes. The first meeting with Zoe was a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Penelope had spent hours preparing a welcoming environment, filling a guest room with age-appropriate books, toys, and decorations. When Zoe arrived, accompanied by her social worker, she seemed shy but curious. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail of her potential new home. As the day progressed, Zoe began to open up. She showed a keen interest in Reggie's tablet, asking intelligent questions about how it worked. With Penelope, she bonded over a shared love of animals, particularly cats. By the end of the visit, both the Ellingtons and Zoe seemed eager to move forward with the adoption. The following weeks were a whirlwind of visits, paperwork, and preparations. Despite some concerns about gaps in Zoe's background information, the Ellingtons pressed on, their hearts already opening to this child who needed a home. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of anticipation, they stood before a judge, officially welcoming Zoe into their family. As they left the courthouse, Zoe clutching a new teddy bear and the Ellingtons beaming with pride, none of them could have predicted the turbulent path that lay ahead. The first few weeks of Zoe's life with the Ellingtons were filled with joy and discovery. Penelope delighted in helping Zoe decorate her new room, the two of them poring over color swatches and bedding options. Reggie, always the tech enthusiast, introduced Zoe to educational apps and games, impressed by her quick grasp of new concepts. Zoe seemed to blossom in her new environment. She devoured books from the extensive library the Ellingtons had curated for her, showing a particular interest in stories about animals and nature. Her laughter, once rare, began to fill the house, especially during family game nights or impromptu dance parties in the living room. The Ellingtons' friends and family, initially skeptical, were won over by Zoe's charm and apparent adjustment to her new life. At a welcome barbecue hosted by the couple, Zoe confidently introduced herself to guests and even helped Penelope serve dessert, earning admiring comments about how well she was settling in. However, as the weeks wore on, small cracks began to appear in the idyllic facade. Zoe's sleep patterns became erratic, with the girl often wandering the house at night, claiming she couldn't sleep. She began to show an intense aversion to certain foods, refusing to eat anything green and insisting on a diet that consisted mainly of sugary cereals and fast food. More concerning were the moments of sudden mood swings. Zoe could go from laughing and playing to sullen silence in the blink of an eye, often retreating to her room and refusing to engage for hours. When Penelope gently tried to discuss these changes, Zoe would plaster on a smile and insist everything was fine, leaving her adoptive mother feeling unsettled and unsure. As the honeymoon period began to wane, the Ellingtons found themselves navigating increasingly choppy waters, their dream of a perfect family beginning to show its first signs of strain. As summer faded into autumn, the challenges of integrating Zoe into the Ellington family became increasingly apparent. What had started as minor behavioral quirks evolved into more serious and disruptive issues, testing the limits of Reggie and Penelope's patience and parenting skills. The first major incident occurred during a dinner party the Ellingtons hosted for Reggie's business associates. Zoe, who had been sulking in her room after being told she couldn't have ice cream before dinner, suddenly appeared in the dining room. Without warning, she overturned the carefully set table, sending crystal glasses and fine china crashing to the floor. As the stunned guests looked on, Zoe screamed that she hated everyone before running back upstairs. Mortified, the Ellingtons made their apologies and ended the evening early. Later, when they tried to talk to Zoe about her behavior, she alternated between cold indifference and tearful remorse, leaving them confused and frustrated. This pattern of destructive behavior continued to escalate. Zoe began to show a disturbing lack of empathy for others' feelings or possessions. She accidentally deleted important files from Reggie's work computer, claiming she was just trying to help organize things. Penelope's prized collection of antique porcelain figurines mysteriously ended up shattered, with Zoe insisting she had no idea how it happened. At school, Zoe's teachers reported increasing problems. She was disruptive in class, prone to angry outbursts, and seemed to take pleasure in manipulating her classmates, often pitting them against each other. Despite her obvious intelligence, her grades began to slip as she refused to complete assignments or participate in group activities. The financial toll of Zoe's behavior was significant. The Ellingtons found themselves constantly replacing broken items from electronics to furniture. They hired tutors to help with her schoolwork and a series of therapists to address her emotional issues. Each specialist seemed to have a different opinion on the root of Zoe's problems, leaving the Ellingtons feeling overwhelmed and ill-equipped to help their daughter. Perhaps most concerning was the strain Zoe's presence put on Reggie and Penelope's marriage. They often found themselves at odds over how to handle Zoe's outbursts. Reggie, frustrated by the constant disruptions to his work and home life, advocated for stricter discipline. Penelope, drawing on her background in pediatric care, pushed for a more nurturing approach, convinced that Zoe's behavior stemmed from past trauma. Their once united front began to crumble under the pressure. Hushed arguments behind closed doors became more frequent, often ending with one of them sleeping in the guest room. The warmth and affection that had defined their relationship for so long gave way to tension and resentment. As the months wore on, the dream home that the Ellingtons had created began to feel more like a battleground. The elegant decor was marred by patched walls and replaced furnishings. The once peaceful atmosphere was shattered by frequent screaming matches and slamming doors. And at the center of it all was Zoe, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and destructive impulses, leaving chaos in her wake. The Ellingtons, who had once believed their love and resources could overcome any obstacle, found themselves facing a challenge that threatened to tear their family apart. Recognizing that they were in over their heads, the Ellingtons embarked on a desperate search for help. They started with individual therapy sessions for Zoe, hoping that a professional could unlock the mysteries of her behavior and provide strategies for improvement. Dr. Amelia Thornton, a child psychologist specializing in adoption trauma, took on Zoe's case. In the sterile confines of her office, Zoe presented a different face than she did at home. She was charming and articulate, weaving elaborate stories about her life with the Ellingtons that painted a picture of domestic bliss. Dr. Thornton, sensing the disconnect between Zoe's accounts and the concerns raised by her parents, recommended family therapy sessions in addition to Zoe's individual appointments. These family sessions were grueling affairs. Zoe would often shut down completely, refusing to engage or responding with rehearsed platitudes about how happy she was. When pressed, she would explode in fits of rage, accusing the Ellingtons of not really wanting her and threatening to run away. Reggie and Penelope, caught off guard by these outbursts, struggled to present a united front, often contradicting each other in their attempts to address Zoe's accusations. Parallel to the therapy sessions, the Ellingtons sought advice from adoption specialists. They attended support groups for parents of adopted children with behavioral issues, finding some comfort in the shared experiences of others facing similar challenges. However, they also felt a sense of guilt and failure when comparing their struggles to families who seemed to have successfully integrated adopted children into their homes. One consultant, Dr. Evelyn Walsh, suggested that Zoe might be suffering from reactive attachment disorder, RAD, a condition sometimes seen in children who have experienced early trauma and disrupted attachments. This diagnosis offered some explanation for Zoe's behavior, but also opened up a new world of specialized treatments and interventions, each with its own proponents and critics. As the Ellingtons delved deeper into the world of attachment therapies and trauma-informed care, they found themselves overwhelmed by conflicting advice and methodologies. Some experts advocated for strict behavioral modification techniques, while others pushed for a more nurturing, child-led approach to healing. Throughout this process, Zoe remained largely resistant to intervention. She would engage superficially with therapists and counselors, telling them what she thought they wanted to hear, only to revert to her destructive patterns as soon as she returned home. The Ellingtons began to feel as though they were running in circles, expending enormous amounts of energy and resources without seeing any real progress. As months passed with little improvement, the hope that had initially driven their adoption journey began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of desperation and despair. The incident that would push the Ellington family to its breaking point occurred on a crisp autumn day, 8 months after Zoe's adoption. The day had started like any other, with the usual morning rush of getting Zoe ready for school amidst her protests and delaying tactics. Penelope had just dropped her off at the front gates of Oak Ridge Academy, watching as Zoe trudged reluctantly toward the building. Just 2 hours later, Penelope received a call from the school principal, requesting her immediate presence. Upon arriving, she was ushered into the office to find Zoe sitting sullenly in a chair, her clothes disheveled and a defiant glare on her face. The principal, Dr. Harriet Blackwood, wore an expression of grim concern as she relayed the events of the morning. Zoe had been caught trying to set fire to the school's science lab. A teacher had walked in just as she was attempting to light a pile of papers doused in chemicals. When confronted, Zoe had become violent, throwing equipment and screaming incoherently. It had taken 3 staff members to restrain her and prevent further damage. As the principal spoke, Zoe remained silent, picking at her nails with feigned indifference. But when Dr. Blackwood mentioned that the police had been called and were on their way to take a statement, something in Zoe snapped. She launched into a tirade, her words spilling out in a torrent of anger and pain. She screamed about her birth mother, a woman she claimed had tried to sell her for drug money when she was barely more than a toddler. She railed against the series of foster homes she'd been in, each one promising to be her forever family, only to send her away when things got tough. And finally, she turned her fury on the Ellingtons, accusing them of only wanting a perfect pretty doll to show off to their rich friends, not a real child with real problems. As Zoe's rant continued, Penelope sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. This was the first time Zoe had spoken about her past in any detail, and the raw pain in her voice was heartbreaking. But mixed with her sympathy was a growing sense of fear. The depth of Zoe's anger and the calculated nature of her actions at the school revealed a level of disturbance that Penelope wasn't sure they were equipped to handle. The arrival of the police brought a temporary calm to the situation. As Zoe was interviewed by a sympathetic officer trained in dealing with troubled youth, Penelope stepped out to call Reggie. Their conversation was tense, with Reggie insisting that this was the last straw and that they needed to consider alternative arrangements for Zoe's care. Penelope, torn between her maternal instincts and the very real concerns for their safety and well-being, couldn't bring herself to disagree. That evening, after Zoe had been released into their custody, with a warning and a mandatory psychiatric evaluation scheduled, the Ellingtons sat down for a painful conversation. For the first time, they seriously discussed the possibility of disrupting the adoption, of admitting that despite their best efforts, they might not be the right family for Zoe. As they talked into the night, the weight of their potential decision hung heavy in the air, a testament to the devastating toll the past months had taken on their once happy home. In the wake of the school incident, the Ellingtons braced themselves for more turbulence. However, to their surprise and cautious relief, Zoe's behavior underwent a dramatic shift. It was as if the explosive confession at the school had released a pressure valve, allowing Zoe to finally let her guard down. For the first time since her adoption, Zoe began to show genuine vulnerability. She started to open up in therapy sessions, talking about her fears of abandonment and her struggle to trust that the Ellingtons truly wanted her. At home, she made tentative efforts to connect, asking Penelope to teach her how to bake cookies and showing interest in Reggie's work projects. The change was not overnight, nor was it without setbacks. Zoe still had moments of defiance and emotional outbursts, but they were less frequent and less intense. She began to show remorse for her actions, something that had been notably absent before. One evening, she presented Penelope with a clumsily repaired figurine from the collection she had destroyed, a peace offering that brought tears to her adoptive mother's eyes. At school, Zoe's teachers reported improvement in both her behavior and academic performance. She started to form tentative friendships, no longer isolating herself or manipulating her classmates. The Ellingtons received hopeful notes from her teachers, praising Zoe's efforts and progress. Reggie and Penelope, while relieved, remained cautiously optimistic. They had seen glimpses of improvement before, only to be blindsided by new crises. Still, they couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. Family dinners became more relaxed affairs, with genuine conversation and even laughter replacing the tense silences of previous months. As weeks passed without major incidents, the Ellingtons allowed themselves to believe that perhaps they had turned a corner. The idea of disrupting the adoption, which had seemed so necessary just a short time ago, was quietly set aside. They dared to hope that their family might finally be healing. The evening of July 15th began like many others in the Ellington household. Reggie was working late, putting the finishing touches on a major project proposal. Penelope was in the kitchen, preparing a special dinner to celebrate Zoe's 16th birthday, which was just a few days away. Zoe, who had been unusually quiet all day, was in her room, supposedly working on a summer reading assignment. As Penelope set the table, she reflected on the past few years. While challenges remained, Zoe had made significant progress. The violent outbursts had largely subsided, replaced by more typical teenage moodiness and boundary pushing. There were still moments of tension and disagreement, but they felt more like normal family conflicts rather than the crisis-level events of the past. Penelope called Zoe down for dinner, but received no response. Assuming her daughter was absorbed in her book or had her headphones on, she climbed the stairs to Zoe's room. The door was ajar, and the room was empty. A quick search of the house confirmed what Penelope already suspected. Zoe was gone. Panic rising, Penelope called Reggie, who immediately left work to join the search. As they debated whether to call the police, Penelope noticed something that made her blood run cold. The keys to Reggie's prized vintage Corvette, usually kept in a locked drawer in his study, were missing. Meanwhile, on the winding roads leading out of Oak Ridge, Zoe gripped the steering wheel of the Corvette with trembling hands. She had never driven more than a few feet in the driveway under Reggie's careful supervision, but tonight, she felt an irresistible urge to escape, to feel the power and freedom of the open road. In the passenger seat, an empty vodka bottle rolled back and forth, a souvenir from a secret stash she'd been building for months, pilfering small amounts from the Ellingtons' liquor cabinet and supplementing with bottles sneaked from parties she'd attended. As Zoe navigated the unfamiliar curves of the road, her vision blurred and her reaction slowed by alcohol, she found her thoughts drifting to the tumultuous years since her adoption. Despite the recent improvements, she still felt like an outsider in the Ellington family. The weight of her past, the trauma she could never fully explain to them, pressed down on her. In her alcohol-addled mind, she convinced herself that she was doing them a favor by leaving, freeing them from the burden she believed herself to be. Lost in these dark thoughts, Zoe failed to notice the sharp bend in the road ahead. By the time she registered the flashing yellow warning lights, it was too late. She overcompensated, sending the car into a violent skid. The Corvette crashed through the guardrail and plummeted down the steep embankment, rolling several times before coming to rest against a large oak tree. The sound of screeching tires and crumpling metal shattered the quiet night. A couple living nearby heard the crash and rushed to investigate, calling 911 when they saw the mangled wreckage. Emergency responders worked frantically to extract Zoe from the vehicle, but it was clear from the extent of her injuries that they were fighting a losing battle. As sirens wailed in the distance, Reggie and Penelope were driving the streets of Oak Ridge, desperately searching for any sign of Zoe. When Reggie's phone rang and he saw the local police department's number, his heart sank. The news delivered by the somber voice on the other end of the line would change their lives forever. In a cruel twist of fate, the girl they had welcomed into their home with hopes of completing their family had now left them in the most permanent way possible. As they raced to the hospital, the Ellingtons were unaware that their nightmare was far from over. The circumstances of Zoe's death would soon cast a shadow of suspicion over them, turning their private tragedy into a public spectacle. The days following Zoe's death were a blur of grief, confusion, and mounting public scrutiny for the Ellingtons. As news of the tragic accident spread through Oak Ridge and beyond, questions began to surface about the circumstances leading up to that fateful night. Initially, the community rallied around the grieving couple. Neighbors brought food, friends offered condolences, and Zoe's school held a memorial service that highlighted her recent progress and the potential she had shown. However, as details of the accident emerged, the tide of public opinion began to shift. The police investigation uncovered troubling facts. Toxicology reports showed that Zoe's blood alcohol level had been well above the legal limit for an adult, let alone a 16-year-old. This revelation sparked outrage and accusations of negligent parenting. How, people wondered, could the Ellingtons have been unaware of Zoe's drinking problem? Further complicating matters was the discovery of Zoe's journal, found in her school locker. The entries painted a picture of ongoing emotional turmoil, detailing feelings of alienation within the family, and dark thoughts that she had apparently hidden from everyone, including her therapists. Some entries hinted at suicidal ideation, raising the horrifying question of whether the crash had been entirely accidental. As the investigation proceeded, the Ellingtons found themselves under intense scrutiny. Detectives combed through their home, interviewed friends and neighbors, and delved into the family's history. The couple's initial status as grieving parents began to shift to that of potential suspects. Rumors and speculation ran rampant. Some suggested that the Ellingtons, frustrated with Zoe's behavioral issues, had turned a blind eye to her drinking as a form of self-medication. Others, recalling the earlier difficulties in the adoption, wondered if there had been ongoing abuse or neglect that had driven Zoe to her final, desperate act. The media, always hungry for a sensational story, latched onto the case. News vans camped outside the Ellington home, reporters ambushed family friends for comments, and tabloids ran lurid headlines speculating about what really happened behind the closed doors of the seemingly perfect family. Reggie and Penelope, already devastated by the loss of their daughter, now found themselves fighting to clear their names. They hired a high-profile attorney, Valerie Kensington, known for her skill in handling complex, high-stakes cases. Under her advisement, they refrained from making public statements, but their silence only seemed to fuel further speculation. As weeks passed, new details continued to emerge. Investigators discovered that Zoe had been in contact with a man claiming to be her biological uncle, raising questions about whether she had been planning to run away. Interviews with Zoe's classmates revealed a girl who had seemed outwardly adjusted, but who had confided dark thoughts to a select few friends. Each new revelation seemed to cast the case in a different light, leaving the community and the authorities struggling to piece together the true story of what had led to that tragic night. As the investigation dragged on, the Ellingtons found themselves trapped in a limbo of grief and fear, mourning the loss of their daughter while simultaneously fighting to prove their innocence in her death. 6 months after their adopted daughter Zoe's death, Reginald and Penelope Ellington faced charges of child endangerment and negligent homicide in Oak Ridge County Courthouse. The trial became a national media sensation, with prosecutors portraying the Ellingtons as negligent wealthy parents who ignored warning signs of Zoe's troubles. The prosecution brought forward witnesses, including Zoe's therapist, Dr. Thornton, teachers, and classmates who gave mixed accounts of Zoe's behavior and mental state. The defense, led by Valerie Kensington, presented evidence of the numerous interventions the Ellingtons had pursued for Zoe, including testimony from attachment specialist Dr. Walsh about the challenges of parenting traumatized children. A crucial turning point came when Zoe's best friend Lily Summers revealed Zoe had planned to run away to find her birth family. After lengthy deliberations, the jury found the Ellingtons not guilty on all charges. Following the trial, the Ellingtons moved to a neighboring town to heal. The case sparked broader discussions about adoption challenges, particularly regarding older children with trauma histories. Though legally cleared, the Ellingtons continued to struggle with guilt and questions about what they could have done differently.